This is the Impressions Xchange podcast.
Impressions Xchange podcast,
where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Welcome to the Impressions Xchange podcast. On this episode, my colleague Dan Marx, Senior Content Editor at Printing United Alliance, takes some time to speak with Kristen Dettoni, founder of Design Pool. They discuss the possibilities of digital for interior design applications, as well as the myriad opportunities that exist in the interior space.
I'm speaking with Kristen Dettoni, founder of Design Pool. Welcome, Kristen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Can you tell me a little bit about Design Pool, what it is and what it does?
Sure. So Design Pool, we are essentially an image library for commercial and residential interiors. So as print on demand grows within the interior design space, there will be a need for a library where interior designers can tap into that. That's not to say that there aren't some existing libraries, but our library is specific to interiors, and everything is in seamless repeat and vector format. So it makes it very easy to customize your colors and your scale of the design.
Okay. So as a designer, can you tell me how you became aware of the possibilities of digital printing for interior design applications? And was there a tipping point for you where you had that aha moment where you thought, oh my gosh, this could really work. It could be viable?
Yeah. So I've worked in the industry, in the textile industry on the woven side for about 23 years, and was always working in commercial interior spaces for all different markets. So healthcare, hospitality, residential, et cetera. And, but I'm a creative person. I'm a designer. I'm an avid DIYer. So anytime something like Shutterfly or Spoonflower, as those companies came to fruition, of course, my creative mind was like, I don't want to print pictures of my nephews or dogs or my pets. Like, I'm a designer. I want to print patterns and really create products. So as I sort of watched that whole market grow from, I would say, the late 1990s on, being in the commercial space, I then thought, okay, eventually this is gonna happen. It's a natural evolution that it's gonna start working itself into commercial interiors. And the missing link there is really just the right substrates and then the right test, making sure everything passes specifications for commercial spaces versus, a DIY or a residential space.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about the right substrates, what is the stumbling block currently, or what has it been?
So I think, again, it has to do with the durability of the substrate. So typically when you're working with more of like a residential, and it's not to say that residential doesn't have their own specifications, but they're a lot lighter than a commercial space. A commercial space, because it tends to be high traffic areas. When I say commercial space, I'm talking like hospitals, hotels, restaurants. So you can imagine the amount of people that are in these spaces every single day. And so making sure those substrates pass that testing prior to the print application. So that to me was kind of the missing link. But I knew it was going to get there. It was just a matter of time. And then again, hopefully once it got there that, images would be needed.
Okay. And then one of the things I'd like to do within this discussion is really help wide format graphics producers better understand this opportunity for interior applications. And I think while many of them can sort of see the opportunity, kind of visualize it, they may not know how to reach that opportunity. So what are some key things that those producers can do to begin approaching this space?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of printing equipment that they're probably using for, I would say maybe more like retail. So whether it's like, signage for walls or that type of thing, they already have the equipment. So a lot of this equipment can print things like wall covering, which to me is a very easy transition because it's paper to paper. But I think I don't want to say what's lacking necessarily, but as far as understanding the market a little better, it's really understanding your audience. So, knowing that, when traditional printers or when I see when they're printing retail type stuff, sort of their marketing packages, maybe it's a woman and they're showing really bright colors, or it's, kind of crazy splashy designs. And that's perfect for that market because it's showing, obviously that who you're marketing towards, because usually you're marketing towards another human. And then also, it's understanding, showing the print capabilities. So, you can get really saturated colors. And that's still good for the interior market. But I think, putting a specific image. So whether that's a pattern, and again, if they're depending on the market. So if it's a healthcare that they're going after, making sure that what's on that marketing package that they're leaving is a healthcare design specific. And then also, again, it kind of goes back to the substrates of really understanding the substrates that they're looking for and just making sure that it's passing the testing. Because one of the things they're probably going to ask you after they are handed the materials packet is, does this meet the testing? So making sure that you have that testing as well.
Yeah, let's expand on that a little bit more, because it seems like any move into a new vertical market it requires understanding the culture of that market on some level. Do you see any cultural divides between wide format producers and those who are specifying print for interiors? Are they talking different languages, and what can they do to make sure that they're talking the same language?
Yeah, so I would say probably they are talking a slightly different language. I think again, understanding the design language. So there's probably going to be a little more customer service. They're not just going to get an order handed to them, like, here's our graphic, now print 20,000 of these. It's going to be more of, okay, what do you have? I'm looking for this type of aesthetic. Do you have something? So it may be either having a designer on staff, or having a designer that they can tap into. That there's a lot of consultants out there they can work with as an on needed basis. So it's something like that. It's a little more, I don't want to use hand holding, because I don't think that's maybe the right term, but it's more about a little more customer service focused and helping them bring their creative vision to life. Because sometimes, even though you are talking with designers, that doesn't mean they're necessarily visual designers. There may be more designers that understand space and can pick the right furniture and that type of thing, but they may not know fully also what the printer's capable of. So it also kind of comes back to a little bit of education. So speaking their language from a design perspective, and then again speaking their language from a material perspective. Again, it's like understanding the testing. So they're probably gonna ask, for example, if it's like a fabric, do you have like ACT standards, or there's like ASTM testing methods. And then there's sustainability is another factor. They're probably going to ask you, what's sustainable about this product. So that's not to say that you have to have all the answers right there. I think this is a very interesting group of people that you're dealing with. They love to be educated, they love knowledge, but they also love new things. So I think this is something that, the printers have the capability of bringing them new product, especially the fact that it's customizable. I mean, that anytime I work with an interior designer and I tell them, look, just tell me what you want. Like, you can start from here, and then and they're like, what? Really? What? So it's completely eye-opening to them. So
yeah, it really is a different mindset. You're going from, to me, some interior design has felt like very educated shopping, right?
Yes.
You have the ability and the skills to take some of this, some of that, some of this furniture and create something that's aesthetically pleasing. That jump is to say, I'm not shopping, I'm actually specifying. I can work with a designer. And I think one thing that came to mind just a minute ago for me was the idea that even your patterns that you're designing, they are not stuck, as I understand, to a scale, right? If you want to scale them up, if you want to scale them down, make the repeat closer, tighter, you can do that. You can change the colorways. You can still be creative within that pre-designed pattern. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And that's where I think too, in the past, the word, and that's another thing I should say, the word customization is actually not a good word in the industry, because it equates to long lead times, high upcharges. So, and unfortunately, it's again, kind of talking the same language. It's just a word that scares them, but it's an easy word to describe what's happening at the same time. So, so the fact that they can pretty much get what they want, they don't have to settle for an inventory-based system, which is really kind of what has a foothold today. And the other thing I think what's so great about on-demand, and since we're working with a very sustainable culture, an educated culture, that, an on-demand system is super sustainable. They're getting exactly what they want, and no sample is going to end up in the landfill because it didn't get, selected, or there's no extra yardage that didn't get specified. So again, I think it's the way things are going. It just, for me, never happens fast enough.
Okay. And then, going back to sort of the vertical market approach, how can a wide format producer who's kicking the tires of this opportunity do some research on interior design? Where can they get a baseline knowledge of what people are looking for, what their expectations are, industry events, training? What are the opportunities there?
Yeah, so I usually tell people there's a great show called NeoCon. It's in June every year in Chicago every year. It's free, and it's huge. So every OEM, which is the original equipment manufacturer, so there's going to be your Steelcase, your Herman Millers, your Hayworth, and then every jobber. So those are going to be, and I'm going to probably talk a little more like textile and wall covering, but Mahara, Momentum, Design Tex, all those companies are there. Most of them have a permanent space. And then on the 7th floor, is more of like the booth spaces that, people, it's a little bit of transitional every year. So that's a great show. It was specific to office interiors, but office is a little tricky right now. And most of those companies have morphed into healthcare because healthcare is huge. So you get a little bit of healthcare in office. And again, what I suggest is just go around and look at all the surfaces and everything that's printed, because or has the capability of being printed or digitally printed that maybe isn't digitally printed yet, because there's still a lot of products out there that I think are rotogravure that could be digitally printed. So there's a lot of possibilities there. And then if you want to get a little more specific into certain markets, there's for hospitality, there's BDNY, which is in New York, which happens in the fall every year. There is HD Expo, which is Hospitality Design Expo, which happens in Las Vegas every year. And I want to say it's like April, May. They've sort of shifted it a bit.
Okay.
And then there's 2 healthcare shows that move around. And again, that's really specific to healthcare. And that is Healthcare Design, HCD, which is Healthcare Design Expo, I think, and then Environments for Aging. So I would say those are the 5 major trade shows.
Okay. And just because you kind of called out some of these different things, healthcare, office settings, how do you think post-COVID interior design has changed? And how do you think digitally printed applications help foster that change or help make it realize it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, the world of interiors, anytime there's any sort of economic downturn, it's like the first thing to go and the last thing to come back. And office is actually the worst. So yeah, office has been sort of in decline for many years. And of course, even prior to COVID, with the flexibility of like working from anywhere, that's sort of challenged the office environment. And COVID's really thrown that out. I always joke that, the trend too in interior design has really been shifting to, everybody wants to feel like they're home when they're away. And so I think, we were thinking that so much that COVID was sort of like, well, we'll make that happen for you. Like everyone's going to stay home. So anyways, but as far as the opportunities for printing, again, I think, for example, like hospitality, hotels, they're really supposed to refresh their rooms. I think it's anywhere from like 4 to 6 years. Of course, economic downturns can mess with that a little bit, but I think what digital printing provides is a great way to really, I'm trying to think what's design the space where it's really unique to that brand. So It's really offering some great brand recognition, and something too that they can easily change out every year. So the substrate can stay the same, but they know that, again, if they don't have to like certify a new substrate or certify necessarily a new supplier. It's more about like, okay, we know the substrates work, so every year we can change out the print. I mean, they could really change out the print every year if they wanted to. Or one office company I'd heard, which I thought was really interesting, was that they actually, in order to get people to stay in their space and want to come to work, they have one area where they just use like a peel and stick wallpaper, and they change that space out every month just to give their employees something interesting to look at. So I think, again, it's good news because it's a lot more product being made.
Yes.
But that's where I see a lot of opportunity too.
Okay. And then how do you think, or how successful do you think you've been in getting interior designers and decorators to sort of think digitally? It's cool that we have all this great technology, but it seems like if the people doing design upstream don't understand that they can take advantage of the implications of digital printing, then it's not going to happen. So when you have that talk with people, what do you say?
Yeah, so I pretty much say it's education, 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 because I don't even think I would almost bet my life that they don't even know like digitally printing from like rotogravure, et cetera. Like they just know printed.
Yep.
So I think that, and they don't necessarily need to know the back end details, but they need to know the capabilities of they can get whatever they want. And like to your point earlier, at any scale, any color, change our, if it was colorful, change it out to white, drop the background off, put it on a window film. Like there's so many different possibilities. And that's why I said too, it kind of comes back to the printers too, as far as, educating them, and then also that customer service to help bring their vision to life. So I think once their eyes are open, then they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But as we all know, time is also very precious, and it can be is trying to simplify the process as much as possible, I think is also going to be key. So education, simplification, to me are the two really big things.
Okay. And I think one of the things that's interesting to understand, and I heard you do a presentation recently where you talked about the difference between interior designers and interior decorators. And if you could elaborate on that a little bit and maybe extend that into like how you would approach these groups differently based on their knowledge base or their expertise.
Yeah, so interior designers, they go to school for 4 years. They are certified and they have to stay certified. So they take what's called CEUs every year, and I can't remember the amount they have to take, but and that's another way to educate interior designers. Interior decorators, most of them do, at least do courses or classes. They don't have to be certified. They tend to be more residential because of that. I want to say they're a little more aesthetic focused. So making sure, they have the right color palettes and prints and things of that nature. It's not so much about product specifications or understanding that your work, for example, interior designers tend to work more in commercial spaces where they're having again to deal with moving people around the space and making sure it meets all the testing for flammability and abrasion and all that fun stuff. So so those are really the two, and I don't want to oversimplify anyone's job, but those are kind of the two simple ways to identify them. As far as reaching them, again, commercial spaces, there's a lot more volume there. As you can imagine, when you have, if you're doing an entire hotel chain or you're doing a restaurant chain. So it's going to probably be a little more work. Like I said, you're going to have testing specifications, sustainability, but it's worth it. If it wasn't worth it, then a lot of these jobbers would not be existing today. So again, I think it's just a little more upfront, reaching the residential group. That could just be maybe a little more of like online marketing, social marketing. They're not big firms. Like they tend to be individuals that, have their own business and maybe just have a couple people that work for them. So, versus commercial interiors tend to have a lot of them, they're very, very large firms and they're global firms as well. So.
Okay, let's talk about design a little bit. And with you being a designer for interior elements, if you go to a lot of the designers working in the wide format space, they're used to designing and working with marketing pieces. Bananas $2.99, or something that is the high quality, high resolution mural, let's say, that goes into a retail space. How is design different from for interior spaces? And somebody who has worked in that traditional wide format space, what skills do they need to be a good designer or service provider for somebody looking for interiors?
Yeah, that's a good question. To me, obviously, there's a lot of pattern in the spaces. So, understanding how to design and repeat, I think, is key. There are some very simple repeats like half drops and things like that. But it's more about when you have like a tossed image, or if you're doing like a texture. So maybe something that looks like a woven that isn't a woven. That's where you have to kind of understand like how to avoid what's called either repeat marker tracking, where, you can see it. And then also understanding, is it going on a pillow, which maybe it's not that big of a deal, but if it's going as wallpaper, then it could be really obvious if there's like a tracking issue with it. So, and I do get calls sometimes to work out repeats. I mean, it's something that I've been doing for years and years. So it does take a little bit of time. And just, for general knowledge too, I mean, some repeats, if they're textures, I mean, I can spend easily 8 to 16 hours trying to get a repeat correct.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah. So understanding that. And I think again, too, it just kind of comes back to really understanding your market and who you're kind of designing for, whether it's for healthcare, whether it's for hospitality. And then also this is really tricky too, is you're trying to get into the interior designer's head. So again, these aren't necessarily all visual people. So, when someone tells me, oh, I want it to be khaki, I'm like, or, the color khaki, I'm like, well, khaki is a lot of different shades. So like, is it like an olive green, or is it more of like a taupey green? So, it's really, again, trying to get into your customer's head and really understanding what they're looking for. Because to your point, when someone says bananas and $2.99, like it's a very obvious image. Because you're probably going to buy a banana image, or they're going to provide one to you, and then you're going to put the $2.99, and then you're done. So it's very, very different.
Okay. And then why is it that patterns and repeats are still a thing in digitally printed interiors? I mean, it seems like with, digital printing, you don't need to use patterns anymore. You don't need to use limited colorways anymore. You can have it all. But why do those remain? And well, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So, for me, I mean, I've always worked with a lot of restrictions within design, whether it's, like you said, the repeat size or the colors. So when digital print came along, I was like, woohoo! I don't have to worry about like 13.5-inch repeat. And it's so funny because some of these repeats either had to do with with rotogravure, like the size of the drum, or like, for example, 13.5 came from that was the standard pillow size. So that's where all the looms are set up to 13.5-inch repeats. So, so I think that it's funny because usually once the restrictions are lifted, like people go crazy, like they go to the extreme, and then everyone kind of gets pulled back. Like, okay, now we know we can do it, but let's kind of pull back to what makes sense. So again, it's really kind of just understanding your market and what makes sense to them. For me as a designer, it's been really beneficial, but the restrictions aren't completely gone. It also depends on the product offering. So for example, if I'm designing for ceiling tiles, which that itself has a square repeat, or if I'm designing for wall panels, which, they'll tell me like, yeah, you can repeat it out, but, our panels are 48 inches wide, and then that has to repeat within the space. So even though the restrictions are limited, are removed from the actual printing process, and I would say that they're removed from the width, never from the length. So you always have to worry about repeating top to bottom, unless it's a mural,
Right.
but for the most part from pattern, yeah. So, and then the color thing too, like I said, I mean, color's awesome, but sometimes it can be too much of a good thing.
Yeah, I think early on when I saw in the wide format segment people starting to introduce this concept of doing interiors, they wanted to show all the capabilities, and they ended up making these sort of mock rooms that they were mock rooms, but they were never spaces that you would want to spend any time in.
Yeah.
And that idea of you have to sell the possibilities, but that idea of it being kind of pulled back to being, this is a space you need to live in or to work in or convalesce in if you're in a hospital room. It needs to be done with subtlety. And I think the interior space is probably the best example of that.
Yeah. And to your point too, I mean, I still like, I'll go to print shows and I'll see something like someone, and I think they're still taking that concept of, the retail or the graphic printing and sort of, and again, like you said, like, oh, we want to showcase the colors, which I understand, but people put themselves in those spaces. That's
Right.
why when you look at furniture stores, I mean, maybe they only sell sofas, but they're putting in a space with a table and a plant so you can envision yourself in that space. So yeah, it's selling the printing process, but it's not selling the product. And I think that's where a disconnect is. So sometimes I'm just like, oh, please just use one of my patterns. Like, just take it. Like, you're not like, I'll give it to you just to sell it. So.
Right. Um, a quick question. I know we ran into each other at the recent Printing United Expo. In terms of new technologies was there anything you saw that really kind of expanded your thinking in a way where you thought, wow, that is amazing?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was like completely new, like I may have seen it even the year before, but just seeing it again, like I get very excited about. So, a lot of the print capabilities that, like there's one company I know that can print glitter, which I was like, okay, that's cool. Probably amazing for hospitality spaces. I think of like Las Vegas and all that. There's also printers that, can, I don't know how it's done exactly, but essentially like raise the surface of it,
Right.
of the printed product, or layer ink. So the ink is 3D. I mean, it's mind-boggling and phenomenal. And of course, my brain just goes in a million different directions of like, oh my gosh, look at all the stuff you can do. And then I think even all the after services. So whether it's laser cutting or stamping or there's just so much possibility. And I think that's even where it can get overwhelming, again, for an audience. So, if you're marketing to that audience, just be really specific about and make things that make sense to them. So if you have something that, like I said, can print something raised, which I think, again, okay, so it's so hard to get product to pass abrasion. So things like embroidery, which is also expensive, is out of the question. And I see a lot of these opportunities on apparel. So I'm like, can we take this from apparel into upholstery? And then how cool would that be to have like, something that looks like embroidery, feels like embroidery, but still passes all the abrasion and isn't super expensive like embroidery. So that's where I start making these connections and really want to see things moving in that direction.
Okay. And are there a few interior application areas that you're particularly excited about? And what I mean is, things like we've talked about a lot about wall coverings, but floor tiles, ceiling tiles, window treatments. Where do you think there's the best opportunity, the best bang for the buck right now?
I definitely see a lot with coated fabrics, digitally printed coated fabrics. So vinyls, polyurethanes, again, like I said, they tend to be really flat. So if there's, I don't know if it's 3D inks or even just offering that, there's not a lot out there. And it's as far as upholstery goes, it's 60% of the upholstery, of the market. So it's a pretty big chunk. And of course, with COVID, people want more wipeable surfaces. I also think that there's a possibility for residential. Typically, a lot of residential tends to be printed on wovens if there's a print element involved. I think how cool would that be for like an accent faux leather chair that's printed? So again, I think there's a lot of potential there. I think there's a lot of potential for flooring. So whether it's vinyl flooring or carpet, again, it's sort of taken hold in the residential with a lot of those like printable, washable rugs. And I know that there's capabilities out there, but there's the ability within the large companies. So there's not smaller companies kind of doing it on demand. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And there's a lot, there's so much like window films. And I think, while I hear a lot of people wanting to get into wall covering, which is good. Again, I think it's like a very easy transition from paper to paper.
Right.
So maybe the traditional wall covering, I don't want to say it's saturated because I still think that there's opportunity, but, think of like, someone had mentioned they could do spot color, or someone mentioned that they can then apply like a dry erase to it, where like a whole wall could be, dry erase. So again, it's sort of taking what you have, understanding the marketplace, and then sort of finding your niche.
Okay. I just wanted to share just a kind of a personal experience related to interior stuff, but a couple of years ago, we were redoing a bathroom in our house, and I went to buy ceramic tile and, got a few boxes of it, brought it home, and I'm, kind of unpacking them, getting it out of the box. And I realized every tile had a different print on it. It wasn't the sort of where every tile looks exactly the same and you end up with this sort of visual pattern. And as somebody who covers digital printing, I was like, oh my God, this is what we've been talking about. These tiles were digitally printed and it looked like I had bought marble, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it all looked different. It all looked random, and installed, it looked beautiful because it had that randomness.
Yes.
And I think the reason I say this is I think some of these changes are happening around us when we don't even realize it. And we get to a point where the novelty of digital printing goes away and it just becomes an interior treatment. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what digital printing really offers, is it can offer that randomness. And also I think that probably the average person has no idea how much is digitally printed in their house.
Mm-hmm.
I have digitally printed countertops in my kitchen and my bathrooms. My tile probably is digitally printed. I probably have to get down on my nose to it, but it probably is.
Right.
So I think that, to me, that's a lot of the wood grains on the ceramic tiles are digitally printed. So,
Yep.
it's phenomenal. It's amazing. And I kind of do like the fact that maybe nobody notices. We know it, but
Mm-hmm.
that just shows how perfect it is, that people aren't paying attention to it. And it's possibly even a little more sustainable in some cases, that, you're maybe like in the fact that you're not using like real wood or real tile.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had also mentioned that sort of those inventory models of, producing 10 million square feet of a product that doesn't sell.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
That's the big, it's funny because I did have one customer once reach out to me and said, well, I only want to buy designs from you that will sell. And I thought, well, if that were the case, we'd all be rich, like, right.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be no inventory anywhere.
Yeah.
So, which is sort of why I sort of built the business model the way I did, was to, benefit the printers of having all the information without having all the upfront costs. So, I think, God, sorry for where I was going with this. Just totally went on a tangent. I apologize for that. What were we talking about?
We were talking about, oh gosh.
No, I threw you off.
Oh, you were talking about a customer said, I only want to use patterns that will sell.
Yeah. And oh God, other than the, we were talking about, oh, I'm so sorry. I totally lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Why don't we just move to the next question? I'll cut this little part out here. So I know you've had a chance to talk to, let me start again. I know you've had the chance to talk to some digitally printing. Oh my God. We're both,
I'm so sorry. I threw you off. I'm so sorry.
All right. Last try. I know you've talked to some wide format producers in the past about interior design opportunities. And among those you've talked to and had discussions with, do you think there's one misconception they have about the interior design space? And what do you say to them to try to help correct that misconception?
I think it's a common misconception for almost anyone starting a business or trying something different, is sort of like, if you build it, they will come, or,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just put this link on my website and people will start clicking on it. Again, I wish it were that easy. So yeah, it sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier, just, understanding the customer, understanding your market. You don't need to put a ton of energy into it. You already have the product, but just making sure that you have the testing requirements, and then making sure that, your marketing materials that you're sharing with them to pitch the product fit their needs. So what we're talking about, the patterns visually appealing to them for their market, the colors visually appealing to them for their market. So, you can't just dip your toe in the water. Like, you at least have to be waist deep to have an impact. So,
Right. If not, just using the diving board.
Yes. Or jump all in. That's okay too.
Yeah. Well, Kristen, thanks so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it. I value your insight about the interiors segment, and I think the opportunities for interiors plus digital printing are huge, and I think you're helping people get their heads around it. So I do appreciate it.
Oh, great. And I love the opportunity to educate and chat. So I appreciate it as well. Thanks.
Very good. Well, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
I want to give my thanks to Dan for hosting this episode and to Kristen for sharing her expertise. Finally, I want to thank all of you, our listeners. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Impressions Xchange podcast.